Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. So I spent about an hour, a couple hours last night trying to train OpenAI to emulate my illustrations, art style, my drawing style, my painting style. I uploaded about 10 different paintings in their frames and everything. And I said, use these, look at these, and then let's recreate. I want to make a new illustration of blah, 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 guy sitting on a pig in a cornfield full of ears of corn with actual ears, And it got the colors right, and it got certain things right, certain details right, but it didn't get the style right, And I kept trying to say, look, I'd have to explain very diligently that my distortions and impossible perspectives, bad anatomy, distorted faces, all that stuff were intentional. Because to me, the awkward discomfort is what's funny about humanity. When you're using kind of a cartoon drawing style, it's implied that you want things to be funny. But for the life of me, I couldn't get it to do it. Like it kept trying to correct things. Like everything ended up being forced into sort of a commercial direction, like Disney or even The Simpsons. The Simpsons, when it first started out, was very crude and jagged and misshapen and not consistent. And I personally, that's what first drew me to The Simpsons, was that crudeness, like South Park. South Park is crude. There's nothing real about anything in South Park. There's nothing that conforms with reality at all. And the more I kept trying to prompt ChatGPT, it would kind of get further and further away. And it could articulate what I wanted, and knowing that it was intentional, that my distortions and everything were, Look, the way I looked at it when I was drawing is when I first started out in art, I wanted to make things look real. That's kind of like the idea. You try to draw things in proportion so that they reflect the way you see things. Eventually, by the time I got into high school and like my junior year, I was winning art contests for photorealism because I would just really, with a fine-tooth comb, make sure everything was right. Of course, I look back on the drawings now, and there's some proportions that are off, and ellipses are kind of skewed and wonky, which is proof that I didn't trace them. I had competitors in different high school that I knew were tracing the proportions, and then they were, color painting them in. But it's the proportions are really important, And so I would have these realistic things with maybe a little bit of a wonky distortion here or there. So I was having photorealism, but you could tell a human did it because it wasn't perfect, Of course, I could have done it perfect if I had used rulers and all these other things to measure things, but I didn't. I was kind of freehanding it, and got pretty close. So I understand that discipline. I did it a lot. I kind of got addicted to it just because of the attention that it brought. People are very impressed by photorealism. If you can use your hands to make a very realistic face or automobile or whatever it is with the reflections and everything, people get really impressed by that. And because it is impressive, it's a demonstration that your senses are all connected, that you can see reality, channel it through your body, put it through your fingers, draw the things, make the shadows. It's an impressive thing It's an impressive demonstration that somebody has patience and they can see the world and accurately reflect or represent reality in an analog human way, right? So that's still to me impressive. But once you know how to do it, once you've trained yourself to be as patient as you need to be, and that's really what it is, it's patience, patience to see things the right way, use your hand in a smooth enough way that you can get it. There's a lot of discipline that goes into it. Once you learn the tricks, you can go a lot faster. It's with anything, At first it's slow, then it speeds up. You learn different little techniques to bypass roadblocks and mistakes, right? But once you do that, then it becomes like, okay, well, why am I doing this? We have a camera. There's a Xerox machine right there. Why am I doing photorealism? Is it just only to impress people? Because that's just kind of weak reasoning to me. It's like, that feels like, it's not, I mean, everything's art, I guess, but you're not really expressing anything. What are you saying? I guess you can, it's what you're drawing. Oh, you drew an old car. Okay, great. You like old cars. There's beauty in old cars. You didn't design the car. Anyway, for me, once you acquire the tools, the next step is having a point of view and expressing something. Saying, here's what I think about the world. Again, remember, all this stuff, our artists are the fucking weirdest, maybe the worst vice-filled people in the world. The fact that you'd want to manipulate people with art is already a little bit suspect. So take that into consideration when I'm talking here. But so anyway, I learned how to do this. I had an art teacher, bless his heart, in high school who really wanted to seize upon my abilities, my technical abilities, and make me as his protege. But I didn't have any interest in that. I didn't want to paint wildlife scenes and mountains, and that was what he was all about. And the more he kind of tried to direct me in that area to keep going with my photorealism, because he wanted to impress people vicariously through me, like, this is one of my students, so it was kind of a selfish endeavor for him too. But don't make me tell you the story about when I made him cry once. I feel badly about it, but not really, because he really was taking, anyway. So I was just being a dick. Let's be honest. I was just like, okay, I know how to do that. And then I started doing abstract things. This was in the 80s, so, I was thinking I was being really avant-garde or whatever, but really I was just kind of going along with the flow of the 80s, retro 50s, mid-century shapes, floating shadows, that stuff. And I was doing that kind of thing. And then I dabbled in abstract art, just splotches and paint and all this other kind of stuff, because my reasoning back then and still was like, well, why should I do something that God does better than me? And a deer is beautiful. A mountain is beautiful. A lake is beautiful. A tree is beautiful. A flower is beautiful. There's beauty everywhere you look. But I don't need to create a tree. I don't need to create a flower. And if I try to compete and create my own flower, well, mine's going to come up short. Because God's is going to be better, first of all, because it's alive. Mine is dead, So I didn't quite see the point in that. Like, why compete with God? And my reasoning was, maybe I should make something that God only can make through me. By the way, I wasn't thinking exactly in these terms. I'm just kind of utilizing them with how I think now, But I thought nature nature needs me. If nature wants to make a weird cartoon, it's going to have to use me. Sure, there are frogs that look like cartoons. There are certain monkeys with funny eyes. There are certain bugs that already look like cartoons. You know what I mean? But in order for me to weird things out and make things not fit into a 3D world, I can take as many liberties as I want, and I can make things look. There's kind of a miracle that you can sit down with a pencil and draw a stick figure. A stick figure looks nothing like a man, a round head with some sticks, but yet human beings understand it as being a man. It's kind of a miracle. It's a weird deciphering ability that we have where we can make something that looks nothing like a thing we want to represent, but yet human beings can decipher it and go, that's this. So that was kind of my point with taking liberties with my cartooning and illustration style. It's like I would draw things in a distorted kind of a way. There's some benefits here too, because it frees you up. Like if you want to get the anatomy just right on something, you got to block it out. You got to use perspective. You got to draw some lines and make sure your foreshortening is right and think your vanishing points are all correct. Well, if you throw those rules away, things get weird, things get funny, things get awkward. Why do I need to worry about if the elbow is going to be right? I don't even need bones in these characters. They can have curved arms. They don't need bones. They can be rubber. And you still get the idea. You still know what's going on because there's a hand and it's connected to a shoulder. So there was two benefits to that, and that you don't have to obey the rules. Things turn out kind of looking funny. They don't look like nature. There aren't people with rubber arms. You know what I'm saying? There's anyway. So that's what was fun with drawing, and that's kind of what I started. The funny thing is starting way back in second grade, I started entertaining my friends drawing things that I called geefers. 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 Because I was a big fan of Charles M. Schulz and cartoons, and I just started drawing my own little cartoons where I would just make my friends laugh by combining. I remember one of my first ones, I drew a guy with ladders for legs and just ridiculous things. They were kind of like surrealist, funny, cartoony things. Guys with gigantic ears, a guy that's made out of all noses, What if? I could sit around for hours with friends and just go, what if this, what if that, But when I was wondering what my style was after I got home from my Mormon mission, and I had been drawing and painting in all these different styles, mixing photorealism, whatever, I found myself doodling on a page, as I often did, all through high school, always doodling, drawing these little cartoons, borrowing from this character, borrowing from that character, making my own cartoons and just being generally ridiculous. But I never took those things very seriously, But this one day I thought, why am I worried about having a style when I'm doing this automatically? This is kind of what I do in my free time. Why don't I just finish these out? Why don't I just fill the whole page with this rather than just keeping it as a little doodle? And that's how my illustration style was kind of born back then. It was laborious because doing a doodle without having to fill in the rest of the picture, you're done with it. It's a silhouette on a page, whatever. But once you have to put it in an environment, that's another thing you have to think about. Are there other props? Are there other pieces of the story? The more you fill out, the more storytelling you have to do, and which is fun, but also there's this element about it where the more you add, the more potential there is for you to fuck it up, to ruin the story, and then have to erase something, and maybe then you erase through the first layer of the paper and you got an erase mark, and that's, Anyway, it can be frustrating. But so that weird style, these strange characters with distorted limbs and bad proportions. That became my style, and it kind of evolved over time into little tricks that I would do to keep my universe consistent. You know, I chopped off the top of heads so that heads kind of ended right above the eyebrows. Barely anybody had any head over it. Just compressing. It's almost any character I would do would be a head was almost all face. Forget about the rest. You know, in real life, your face is only the size of the palm of your hand, like as far as your eyeballs, your nose, and your mouth. But in cartoon world, you can do all face, very little head. And then you can make the head, you know, gigantic and the body tiny. And the limbs didn't have to come out. You know, when a kid draws a head, it's just like this giant head. I kind of went for that. Giant head, you know how kids will draw a picture of a giant head and they'll put some arms coming up the side of the head and the legs coming out of the bottom of the head. And there's basically no body. You know, at first, the very first drawings, you even look at your own. And that makes sense because your perception as a child is you're looking at a face, you know? And a face is usually hovering over you if you're down low. And then these arms come out, you know? And then if you're on the floor, think of those long legs going up to that face. Anyway, so that became the basis for my cartoony style. Big heads, arms that didn't have to obey the laws of nature coming out of basically the sides of heads. Necks were almost non-existent. Feet and legs could go any which way. It didn't matter, you know, because it all looks ridiculous. That's what's fun about it. It doesn't obey nature. So anyway, that's a long backstory. So last night, again, I uploaded a bunch of finished paintings to OpenAI. And by the way, OpenAI has gotten really good at editing pictures. And now the image, at first, when I first started messing around with this image stuff was a couple years ago, and the prompts had to be long, and you had to tell it what to do, and it wasn't very good at getting what you wanted, but the results could be funny and strange and all that. But OpenAI has gotten good at using natural language to just direct the robot to do things your way without having to trick it as much. You can just use regular language. In fact, you can just turn your phone on and go, put this same character in a field, you know, have a raptor pooping on his head, you know, whatever. And it will go, okay, I need to use the same, and it will do its best job. But again, this is where I wasted the time last night, is I couldn't get it to, no matter how much I explained what I wanted, and that my distortions and my discomfort and my awkwardness was intentional, and that was part of the humor, I couldn't get it to let go of its, I'm not going to say desire because it's a robot, it doesn't desire anything, but it's programming and penchant for wanting to correct things and improve things, you know? And I kept saying, no, you're making myself look like too much like Robert Crumb and Disney. Get rid of that. And it would go, okay, I get it. And it would repeat back my instructions in another way that made me think that it understood what I wanted. And by the way, they also make these engines so they're basically suck-up engines. So they'll tell you, I got it, your genius is this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, you don't need to do that. I'm using this program anyway. Please dispense with the flattery and all that stuff. Just follow instructions. So it could get it. I even uploaded once, I said, because it still wasn't getting it right. It was still giving me Disney hands. It was still making proportions right. It was still making characters that could exist in 3D space, you know? And the whole point when I was making cartoons is I wanted to make stuff that couldn't really exist in 3D space. It's kind of like Picasso. When Picasso puts two eyes on the same side of the head, you know, if you see that same head from the other point of view, you can't see the eyes, you know? And it gets really weird when you try to make it 3D. But, and this is nothing new, by the way. You know this. Cartoonists for years have been doing things that they're taking advantage of 2D to make things that translate to a character in 2D but don't work in 3D, or that becomes really problematic in 3D. So it understands this. It looks like it understands it, but it can't do it. Even though I say, okay, here's the image you created. Now look at my image. Describe in detail my image, and then describe your image. And it would do a good job, like a fantastic job, describing my image. It would basically say everything about it that I didn't. It said it's got impossible things, its distortions are uncomfortable, impossible placement of the mouth, the shading doesn't work. It sounded like almost a scathing critique of my image, but it was exactly what I wanted, and I was asking it to do, but it wouldn't do it. I says, great, so now I can see that you know what you're looking at. Just do that. And he says, okay, I will train the robots to explicitly and specifically break these rules and do this or that. And it kind of got closer. There's at one point I said, okay, all right, that's not bad, but look at your mouth that you drew on that character and look at the mouth I drew. The mouth in your character works. You can tell that it follows the laws of physics. Mine doesn't. Mine is basically just a slit in a face with all these wonky teeth that are aligned with the lips. There's no way. It's like how a child would draw it. And it would say, okay, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. I said, Lord, you've got my image. All you've got to do is copy my image. Don't use any logic. Don't use any algorithms. Just copy the image, changing the variables that I'm asking you to change. And again, it got close, but couldn't do it. It still looked too much like there was too much Disney, too much Robert Crumb, too much professionalism to it. And it was just annoying, But isn't that crazy that, in a way, I don't know, man. It's like, in the amount of time that I spent trying to get this robot to generate something that looked like mine, and none of them did look like mine. They all look like I hired an artist to make my paintings look better. It's like as if I didn't know how to do it. It's just like, no, that's not the point. The point is when I have scribble fingers and things that don't work, that's part of the joke. You take that away and it's just like, I don't know, the feeling is different. For me, I want that awkward, uncomfortable feeling to be in those 3D images, and it just refused to do them. And it's weird. It's just like, you kind of got to blame, I don't know, I guess that's just the nature of things, because it's really that way a little bit as you create art too. It's like, when you don't know the rules, obviously you're not breaking any rules, but you're also not conforming to any rules. So that's kind of what, and I guess I should say that I've always liked outsider art, air quotes. In other words, art made by people who were never trained. They just are expressing what they want to express. They, so again, there's usually a lot of spatial problems, perspective problems, anatomy problems, but it doesn't matter. I like that. I like bad tattoos, for example, as well. I don't know what it is about it, but I guess what it is that that kind of expression to me, it points back to the human being doing it. The effort. There's nothing I like more than seeing somebody who doesn't know the rules but still putting a lot of effort into something. You know, I used to tell people, you know, people would say, I'd give anything to be able to draw like you. And I go, how about 1,000 hours? How about, if you spend 100 hours on a painting, it's going to be good. Or I'm going to like it. I'll like it. Trust me. If you spend 100 hours on something, I'm going to like it. I don't care what it is. I'm going to see that time investment. I'm going to enjoy it. There's going to be enough detail. And by the way, that's kind of the thing I was trying to explain to the robot last night too, is just like part of the reason why I add so much detail. Like I'll have all these distorted figures and stuff, but then I'll go through very meticulously with the cross hatching and the stippling and the details, draw these intricate borders and put little texture on the clothing. And so it's not that I want to get away with not working. I still want my work ethic to show through. I don't know, because I think that honors the viewer, it honors nature, it honors beauty in general, just to put effort in. If you don't do that, then you're just like, I don't know, some kind of weird psychopath, some narcissist that thinks he can just shit on a wall and smear it around and say, I'm a genius. I hate that shit. So, but yeah, the point is, AI isn't human. It knows, well, it doesn't know anything, but it's looking at things and it's repeating all this stuff, all this art that exists. Here's the problem. The art that exists on a certain level is generally executed pretty well, If you discount museums and stuff from Picasso and Surrealists and Cubists and all that stuff, most of the art that's out there that is elevated and gets widely distributed does kind of, in a way, conform to the physics of reality. Things look three-dimensional or whatever. So it's just really going off those algorithms. It's going, this is the average of all that shit, So getting it to break those rules becomes harder. And again, I see this in just a journey of making art. Once you know the rules, the likelihood that you're going to rely upon them because of the feedback you get for relying upon them is hard to break, And it's why you don't really see too many photorealists doing cubism or going into cartooning or something, because the reward is too great for continuing to do you're going to get more commissions, portrait commissions, if you're making people look really real than you are if you're Picasso and you're putting both of their eyes on one side of their face and making them look like they're shrieking in pain, But yeah, I couldn't get it to break the rules. So I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of people that would look at the side-by-sides of my style and then the AI version of my style. And I would say that there's probably going to be more people that are going to prefer the AI version, And that's fine. But I don't. I like I don't know what it is. I guess also with the more you obey the rules of nature, the more likely you are going to look like the things that other people are doing to obey the rules of nature. That set of rules, and there's a conflict I have here, right? Because, you look at music and you look at art, and they're so similar in some ways, but so vastly different in others. Like, in an image, in a cartoon, the discordant discomfort, awkwardness, to me brings about some humor and a break from reality. But it's flat. It's just one piece. I can look at it, immediately get it, and I can avert my eyes and go on to the next thing. It doesn't require a lot of time. It pulls me in. If somebody does express themselves not according to the rules, but how they want things to be, I'm more likely to get pulled into it, and linger on something that's awkward and strange than I am that something that looks like a photograph. Because again, you're competing with God. There's 1,000 flowers outside. I don't need to look at your flowers, that you made, that are just a copy of his. But with music, I don't want to hear somebody just banging around on a piano, farting around and being discordant. Because it's not one panel. It requires a time investment. I'm not going to stick around for that. I might listen to, who's that guy? Bill Frisell, Coltrane, Lydia Lunch. These discordant outsiders. Oh my God, not Camper Van Beethoven. What's the guy's name? God, I saw this artist one time. Everybody thinks he's a genius. I saw him one time. Eugene, what's his name? Eugene. Anyway, I saw him live in San Diego one time. The worst artist I've ever seen in my life. And he's heralded as this outside artist. So it's weird that on the one hand, in cartooning and art, I like that discordant dysfunction, but in music, I don't. In music, I want beauty. I want things to sound beautiful, and I want them to accomplish the things it wants to accomplish. And in music, to make something really beautiful, there are more rules that need to be sort of followed. You're limited. If you want to make something really beautiful in music, you're already limited, Discordant things kind of got to go out the window. Haphazard juxtapositions. No, those aren't going to fly, Anyway, I'm kind of off track. But what the point I was trying to make is, like, once you know the rules of beauty, it gets harder to break them intentionally. It really does. And AI is a good example of that. There's probably another AI engine out there that, I could upload my images to and say, this is a style, pay attention to everything. And maybe I could get it to just reproduce things. And by the way, I would do that. There's a number of stories that I've written that I always wanted to illustrate all the way through for like a children's book or whatever, that I've always been planning on doing it, but it just is so laborious. It takes so much time, and there's just so much frustration with painting. Like, painting in 3D space, I'll have all my pens in one hand and getting a seating position, and then your hand cramps, and then you lose your fucking pencil, and you're like, where the fuck did I put it? And I'll literally fly into a rage because I can't find the fucking pencil I was just holding 2 seconds ago, and it's somehow underneath my ass because I'm drawing on my bed. I have to rip my bed apart to find it. Then I smudge something, then I spill something on it, it's not enjoyable, making a big painting. It's rough. It's not good. Making them digitally on a phone or whatever, that's a little bit better because you can scroll around. It's ergonomic. Anyway, so the prospect of being able to train an AI to execute my vision in my style is still great. And by the way, I'm going to pivot to another topic here, which is this whole fucking stupid notion that AI can't be copyrighted, or AI is a cheat, or whatever. It's just like, people who say this don't use it. They simply don't use it. The funny thing is I have friends that are doing AI, and there's this one friend who was making beautiful images of these Asian ladies and whatever. And I was going, I would like to see her prompts because they were kind of essential or whatever. And this was, a year ago when your prompts had to be really detailed. And I was going, whatever this guy's writing as his prompt is some very revealing poetry. You know what I mean? It's just like, because he's having to describe in words everything he wants the AI engine to do. And he's having to write out some very vulnerable things. In fact, I challenged him. I said, I want to see some of your prompts. And he goes, no, they're too embarrassing. And I was like, making the case, see, that's your art. That's your art. It's what you want. It's your hopes. It's your dreams. It's your instructions. When a director says the actor do this, put the camera here, that's the art. Pretending like it's not art to tell other craftspeople or tools or machines what to do is insane, because it's the intention. It's what is the story you're telling? How are you trying to manipulate the emotions of others? That's the art. And the same with the music. When I'm doing AI music, the prompts and the decisions and the choices, it's identical to doing it at a piano. It might even be a little bit harder. I have this discussion with people all the time. It's just like, they'll sit down at the piano and they'll put their hands on a chord, and then they'll start singing over the top of the chord. It's just like, okay, you didn't create that chord. That chord's existed throughout time. Those frequencies resonating, that harmony, and now you're just adding to it. The piano did that for you. But it was your intent. You are the one that sat down at the piano. The piano is over there dead, not doing anything. Just like the AI robots are dead, not doing anything. They do nothing until you tell them to do something. And they only do what you want them to do. And the more you boss them around, the more you get what you want out of them, the more they're executing your vision. But it's your vision that is the art. I made hundreds of AI songs. I'm not going to call them AI songs. I use AI engines to make hundreds of songs, and I listen to them still, and I still cannot believe that I made them. They're my songs. The robot did not make them without me. I wrote every lyric. I made every single decision. No different than if I went into a room, with my camera, telling people, sit here, do this, move this, put over there, boom, 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 boom. I'm directing, I'm making the art. I'm producing it. Without me, it wouldn't exist. None of these songs would exist without me, without my experience. They're trying to pass laws that AI creations can't be copyrighted. Now, that's a different discussion, because copyright's a weird thing anyway. But the implication is that the artist didn't do it. And I'm like, bullshit. Just copyright the prompt then. That prompt, that description of what you're trying to get the robot to do, that's copyrightable. Because you're the one that came up with it. Even if it's dumb, make me an image of a frog driving a motorcycle past a factory that's on fire with Bill Clinton as a blimp floating above it. Right? That's just an idea. Pooped it out of my mind. When the robot does that, or when somebody else does that, you could hire a guy in China to do it. You could hire a guy, no matter what, if they execute that vision, that to me, that vision is the art. That execution, it could come through a camera, it could come through a Chinese person, it could come through a cast of 50 different people, it can be built with puppets, it can be done 1,000 different ways. But that idea, the impetus for that idea came from me wanting to do it. And if I see it through and I think it through and I start making it and I start going, well, why is the frog on a motorcycle driving past the pond with a factory in the background and a Bill Clinton blimp in the sky? And then I add more details to it and I do some other things and whatever. And it ends up being either a movie, a video, something that looks like a photograph, something that looks like a cartoon. It doesn't matter, because the images, if they mean something to somebody, the thoughts derived from a human being. So it doesn't matter. All these fucking people, let me tell you. You want me to tell you who's complaining about this more than anybody else? It's the artisans, not the artists, but technical artisans that often, more often than not, don't really have any ideas or are unwilling to express ideas, or they don't have the courage to put their own ideas out there for fear of being called ridiculous. Because even that painting I just described, it's silly, it's ridiculous, whatever, to execute it in a certain way, to present it, because that's part of the thing too. It's after you make it, do you present it? Do you share it? That sharing and presenting, that equals something. That means this is an endorsement. I'm going to be accountable for this. I'm going to put it out there and deal with your reaction to it. Whether you like it or you hate it, I'm going to deal with it. That's part of it. You're the ultimate curator. When you choose your sofa, your interior of your house is a reflection of you. Your outfit is a reflection of you. The shoes that you wear. Are you trying to blend in? Are you trying to stand out? Are you saying anything? Well, you are saying something. But what is it? For some, it's I don't care. That's the message. I don't care. I wear Walmart clothes and that's what I do. Great. That's your expression. Other people want to stand out. And anyway, the art is in the expression. It's not the tool. It never is the tool. It's part of it. It's part of it. But if all the focus is on the tool, let me tell you something. Your intent is probably missing. If everybody's futzing around, and by the way, that's one of my pet peeves of having been an artist for many years, is when people ask, what kind of camera are you using, bro? Just like, oh my God, the camera has nothing to do with it. What synthesizer is that? Okay, you know what I mean? When people are asking me those questions, I'm either like, okay, you missed the point. You're either you're trying to chit chat. I mean, there's exceptions where you're dealing with another artist and they just really do want to know the tools because they have their own ideas. And then you can get into gear discussions that are interesting, but not with somebody who thinks that it's the tool that did it. That's the distinction. Some people, they're asking because they think that if they get that tool, well, then all I gotta do, if I buy the same camera, then suddenly a bunch of naked girls are gonna be around me. Yeah, that's not how it works. I had this friend that I dumped, and he would listen to these AI songs of mine, AI tool created songs of mine, and he'd go, wow, these are amazing. Will you walk me through how to do it? And I'm like, no, nobody walked me through. The tools are there. I told you what they are. Go fuck around with them. I'm not going to teach you how to make the same thing. Just if you don't want to make them, I'm not going to help you do something you don't want to do. I know the difference between people who want to do things and people who don't want to do things, because people who want to do things actually do them. That's how you can tell. A friend of mine, when I was in college age, would ask me if he could borrow one of my ties. I had a big tie collection. And I'd say no, because if you don't have a tie collection, you know, if you had a tie collection, I might let you borrow a tie. Like if you had 100 ties, I might let you borrow one of my ties. But you don't have any ties, which means you don't really care about ties. So you don't get to borrow one. That's the way I feel about art and music. Will you help me do art? Well, if you had 100 paintings, I might help, but you don't make any art, which means you don't want to do it. So why should I waste time with somebody that doesn't want to do something? Anyway, again, that's the other point I want to bring up about AI while I'm belaboring this point, is that it doesn't matter the tool. Look, how many has any tool created more artists? My theory is no. No matter what tools you put in front of humanity, there will always only be this many artists. I don't know exactly what that number is, but it never ever increases. Never. The tools can change, but the amount of people who have the impulse to create and share stays constant. Right? That's how most of the art equipment gets sold in the world to people who think they want to be an artist. They buy the equipment, they buy the expensive camera, they buy the expensive computer, they buy the expensive piano. They play it for 3 weeks, and then it sits for the rest of eternity gathering dust. Because tools never, ever, ever create artists. Artists will always have a job because they are the only ones that will ever turn on the tool to make it generate something that they will curate and share with the world and endorse and put their name behind. And people, guess what, are still going to care about that. They will always care about the human being who's endorsing it. They will always want to know why. Why a frog on a motorcycle driving past a pond with a factory on fire and Bill Clinton blimp in the sky? Why? And why is there a song that goes along with it? And why is it sad? Anyway, I can go on and on, but I won't. Thanks for listening. Unnecessary outro song to totally waste